Hello everyone, and this was my second mains. I have also written a mains earlier. This was my second mains. I want to share with you my experience in exam hall, what I wrote in the questions, what I was able to generate points, data, diagrams, etc. In this video, we will see and analyze UPSC 2024 GS3 paper. Earlier, I have also analyzed the essay paper, GS1 पेपर. हम इस वीडियो में यही देखेंगे कि GS3 पेपर में बहुत ही कम मार्क्स मिलते हैं क्योंकि इस पेपर में थोड़ा टेक्निकल चीज़ें होती हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल साइंस टेक्नोलॉजी में और इन्वायरमेंट में, डिज़ास्टर मैनेजमेंट में, इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी, इकोनॉमी, इसका सिलेबस भी बहुत लंबा है. दैट्स वाई पीपल डू नॉट स्कोर वेल इन दिस. Many selected candidates cannot cross even 100 marks is an excellent marks in GS3. But this year's paper was a little bit easier as compared to previous 2 years, 2022, 2023. Now let's look after the questions and what was the. Coming to question number 1. Examine the pattern and trend of public expenditure on social services in post-reforms period. To what extent this has been in consonance with achieving the objective of inclusive growth? This question is about inclusive growth, and in examining the pattern and trend of public expenditure on social services. In social services, we can mention about health expenditure. In health, we can mention about subsidies given. We can mention Ayushman. We can mention in education services, educational expenditure. We can mention about various schemes about data, and also we can mention about food subsidy, fuel subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, food, fuel, fertilizer. For this, if you will mention just food subsidy, fertilizer, fuel subsidy, this will not be that much impactful. If you validate this by data from economic survey, then you can generate some extra marks. This will be the examination of pattern and trend of public expenditure. Now, since post reforms period, this means that since 1990s. To what extent this has been in consonance with objective of inclusive growth? In this, we can mention despite various expenditures on various social services, the problems still persists. For example, you can mention about hunger issues. You can quote global hunger index, and you can mention about poverty. India has uplifted 135 million people out of poverty since last decade, since 2014, as per Niti Aayog. This is a positive point, but still our per capita income is very low, and still there remains at least 8 to 12% of people below poverty line. This means that inclusive growth target is still not achieved. And in health, we can mention about out of pocket expenditure, double OPE. This is high, which must be reduced. In health expenditure, we can mention our expenditure as percentage of GDP is not that much great as compared to various developed countries. In this, you can give a graph about India's health expenditure, about EU, OECD countries. This will help us in comparison and will be an impactful diagram. Yes, this can be the way forward how to write this question. Now coming to question number 2, causes of persistent high food inflation in India. Comment on the effectiveness of monetary policy of RBI to control this type of inflation. Yes, we can mention why there is a persistent high food inflation in India. We can mention about various factors. Various factors can be mentioned, and we can talk about in our base monetary policy. We can talk about headline, core inflation, headline inflation, and we can tell that monetary policy of RBI has not been that much effective in controlling this type of inflation, that is food inflation. But you must validate it with the data points. Now, in way forward, we can say that in concluding point, we can say that RBI experts argue that RBI must RBI's target is to control 2 to 6% of CPI. Inflation should be in this range. But RBI cannot control the food inflation because food inflation is caused by various factors which are not in the control of RBI. For this, RBI should in concluding point, RBI should look after only core inflation, and core inflation. Now coming to question number three factors responsible for. Now in this question number two, we can give a trend since 1990s, 2010s, 2020s, have how the inflation, what was the trend of the inflation, what were the factors. For example, here balance of payment deficit, and in this we can mention about financial crisis, GFC, and now here we can mention about wars, Russia Ukraine war. This can be the way to make a diagram which will help. Coming to question number three, factor responsible for successful implementation of land reforms in some parts of the country. In some parts of the country, as we know that after independence, various movements were there for land reforms. We know the Bhaves Bhudan movement, or the government making legislation, land sealing acts, etc. But we know that only some parts of the country have been successful. For example, what were those parts of the country? One can be West Bengal, other can be Jammu and Kashmir. These two states were more successful comparatively to other parts of the country. The factors were that there was political will. You can mention communism in West Bengal, Communist Party rule in West Bengal, political will, as I mentioned earlier. Another factors also can be mentioned, and we should also mention why the other states were not that much successful in implementing land reforms. For example, Uttar Pradesh, be it Bihar or others, not much success was witnessed in these states. The factors for this must also be mentioned in this question. Question number 4. Explain the role of millets for health and nutritional security. We were expecting a question on millet because we know that millet was in news since last 2-3 years. Now you can introduce with me what are millets, and in the role of millets in health, you can make a heading in you can make a separate heading for health and another for nutrition security, or you can combine both. For example, first we will introduce about millet, then we can give some example. For example, kutki, kodo, these are some millets. Jawar, bajra, ragi. Okay, then the role of millets should be explained. What are the role, how they are helpful in our diet pattern. In nutritional security, we can show that millets can be grown in rain-fed regions without irrigation. The main characteristics of millet is that they do not need that much water, and they can also be grown as second crop, which will help in improving food productivity as well as farmers' income. And then you can also make a map in this question, India map, and you can mention some regions, for example Gujarat, Maharashtra, and some regions of UP where millet is grown on a larger scale, Rajasthan as well. Uh, and then we will explain, as I told earlier, health and nutrition security in conclusion. In some, and you can also mention International Year of Millets by FAO, and UN also declared this, and India government's PM Shri scheme for millets, PM Shri Anna scheme, something like that. I think I am not writing it correctly, but something like that is there. Question number 5: what is the present world scenario of intellectual property rights with respect to life materials? With respect to life materials, IPR scenario. With respect to life material, biological patents in vaccines, and some biological materials, for example, biological equipments, and there can be also an angle of traditional knowledge. Some MNCs examples some can be given, for example, Monsanto patenting traditional knowledge, conflict of Monsanto, as we have studied Monsanto and potato patent. And some companies patented traditional knowledge, Indian traditional knowledge about neem tree, without giving any due benefits to the originators of the knowledge. This can be shown in this scenario. And in the second part, India is second in the world to find patent. Still only a few have been commercialized. You will have to give reason why only few have been commercialized. In reasons, we can mention about the lack of R&D. We know that Indian private sector is not that much active in funding towards R&D as compared to other, for example, OECD countries. You can make a graph, as I think I also made that is in exam hall. You can make a graph. You can show how Israel is for, I think, it spends at least 6% of their GDP on R&D. And we can give US, also Germany, and then Indian expenditure on it is very much low. You can give this type of comparison, which will be good. Now you will have to give the reasons behind this less commercialization. As I said, R&D expenditure is not that much good, and uh, and private sector participation is also low. And we can also conclude with the National Research Foundation, NRF, which was recently introduced by Government of India. And then we can conclude on positive note. What is the technology being employed for electronic toll collection on highways? What are its advantages and limitations? This question at least have at least four parts. First, in technology, you can mention FASTag, radio frequency identification technology. These two technologies are very normal as we prepare these in prelims. Now, what are the advantages? Advantages, you can mention that there will be less traffic, faster toll collection, effective, efficient toll collection. In limitation, we can mention about digital divide, lack of digital infrastructure, and proposed changes. Recently there was a proposed changes. I could not write this in example because I was unaware of this thing. And then, if you know, you can write about the transition. There will certainly be some potential hazards which should be mentioned. Now, industrial pollution of river water is significant environmental issue. Discuss the various mitigation measures to deal with the problem, and also government's initiative in this regard. We know that river water is significant environmental threat. For you can explain this and give example about Yamuna pollution and Ganga river pollution. Also, we can recently there was news in Bengaluru. Some lakes have been polluted badly. Pollution, industrial effluent pollution in Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh. Many examples can be given and explained. Various mitigation measures to deal with this problem. Yes, government have various mitigation measures can be that industrial effluent should be treated before releasing them into water bodies, so that biochemical oxygen demand (BOD) and biochemical oxygen demand is is as per required level. It should not be it should not be hazardous to aquatic life. And other mitigation measures can be river pollution should be mitigated. River pollution should be mitigated. Untreated discharge solvents must not be flown into river. And government initiative, I think this question came because recently government have taken some initiative. I mentioned in my paper, for example, the first can be mentioned, uh, National Ganga River Basin Authority, which looks after, what was the Namami Ganga mission. Government is also focusing on international collaboration. For example, recently it introduced River Cities Alliance. This was very much in news and an important. If you mention this, you will certainly get some extra marks. This can be mentioned, and these are some government initiative. Now, question number 8. What role do environmental NGOs and activists play in influencing EIA outcomes? EIA was uh, EIA was an expected question because it had not come in recent years. For major projects in India, four examples with all important details. Yes, you can mention about what is EIA, how environmental NGOs and activists play a role. For example, important detail you can mention. For example, for one can be Niamgiri Hills case, Vedanta, Niamgiri Hills Vedanta case. You can mention how activists played a role and the project was halted because it was dangerous to the environment. And others can be role of activists like Medha Patkar, as the question asked is asking about four important examples. Medha Patkar, Niyamgiri, Vedanta, and some other examples can be written. For example, RA Forest Colony, and one was POSCO. POSCO case was also an important. These are some examples which can be mentioned. Now, about narco terrorism. Serious threat across country. Suitable measures to counter narco terrorism. Narco terrorism means drug related national security threat. You can introduce with World Drug Report. As per World Drug Report, India is among the top 10 opioid seizures. Means India is facing this threat currently. Now, in serious threat, we can explain. You can also give a map how narco terrorism is spreading. We can show. First of all, we can make an India's map. This is a very rough map, just to show you. And this can be Pakistan. This is Afghanistan, Iran. Here we can show golden crescent, and in this region you can show golden triangle, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, etc. You can show that India is sandwiched between these two. And here we can write some data, how the drug peddling is happening in India, how serious is the threat. In serious threat, you can mention that 18 lakh adults and 5 lakh children are currently facing this issue. They are meaning they are badly addicted. And so in some suitable measures, we can show that government is taking measures. For example, PCP and Narco Substances Act. There is a one act which is, you can mention that act. You can also mention that NCPCR, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, is also taking steps to control drug peddling among children. It conducts various seminars, etc. And you can mention various agencies. For example, you can also mention CBI's operation, ED's operations. I am currently forgetting that operation name, but this can be mentioned. Context and salient features of Digital Personal Data Protection Act. This is a pretty straightforward question. Those who would have prepared would have written good. Now you should, in context, we can write about how Supreme Court judgments have held upheld right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21, and this was the context. In context, you can also mention Puttu Swami case. In salient features, you will have to mention the features of this act. Discuss the merits and demerits of four labor codes. What has been the progress? You should mention about four labor codes: code on wages, code on occupational safety and health hazard, this that. Now in what in progress we can tell that the progress is lacking, meaning the progress is not that much good because industrialists are lobbying, because industrialists are lobbying not to implement these because this can be a burden on them, and which can also hinder ease of doing business. In way forward, we can mention that these reforms are good for social security benefits, and some middle path balanced way can be told, and then conclusion can be made. What is the need for expanding regional air connectivity? Udan, government's Udan scheme. In Udan scheme, you can tell how the scheme was why the scheme was introduced because northeastern regions were not that much connected via air connectivity. That's why government introduced Uday Desh Ka Aam Nagrik scheme. In this, you can also government in achievement, you can make a graph. You can show that there were 74 airports in 2014, but now they are double. They are now 148. There are now 148 airports. This shows the achievement of Udan scheme, and also you can say that some meaning the flights have increased. Some data can be given. Data can also be given about this. What are the major challenges faced by Indian irrigation system? Measures taken by government. Challenges, we all know they are very normal challenges. The Indian irrigation system is facing those. For example, uh, to quote few, one can be that Indian farmers use excessive amount of groundwater due to subsidies. Recently, solar powered pumps are also fueling excessive irrigation of field and wastage of groundwater. And main measures taken by government, we can mention about various schemes: Jal Jeevan Mission, PA Haryali Mission, and others. And scientific techniques like drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation can also be mentioned. Importance of buffer stocks for stabilizing agricultural prices in India. What are the challenges? Discuss. Importance of buffer stocks. We all know that National Food Security Act provisions related to public distribution systems. We can mention about their importance, how FCI and others keep buffer food grains. They government procures food grains at MSP, and then I also draw I also drew a pie chart there mentioning how much percentage FCI maintains in buffer stock, how much private agencies do, what are the other government agencies which do, for example Central Warehousing Corporation. This can be drawn in this question. In challenges associated we know that there are many challenges, for example wastage, APMC Mandi challenges. These are something which can be mentioned in this question. Now the world is facing an acute shortage of clean and safe fresh water. What are the alternative technologies? This question I could not write that much good because I think I was unaware of these technologies, but I addressed this part by some pie charts showing how the world is facing an acute shortage of clean and fresh water. I also mentioned a case study of Africa, how their religious extremist groups are using water shortage as a weapon. Water is now being used as a weapon to pursue their strategic goals. Then alternative technologies should be mentioned if you know, and their key merits and demerits also. What are steroids? This question was pretty much interesting because there was a news before the exam day. Before the before exam day, there was a news on this question on this about what are steroids, and fortunately, I watched a video on this. That's why I was able to attempt this question. I mentioned first of all you will have to tell about asteroid, define asteroid, normal definition. You should know. You should write that how real is the threat. In this part we can mention about asteroid Apophis. Asteroid Apophis. As per NASA, this can impact the Earth in 2029. Then you can show that by example, if asteroid Apophis impacts, for example, New York, it can destroy whole of New York if it impacts it. This shows the level of threat which asteroid poses to the Earth. And you can also mention if asteroid impacts on land, the destruction can be much larger, if much larger than the impact on water. And in extinction part you can tell how dinosaurs went extinct when asteroid impacted, and what strategies have been developed. In strategies you can mention about DART mission, NASA's DART mission. And in this part, how real is the threat, you can also mention about Yarkovsky effect. Yarkovsky effect, you can mention this also. And nuclear technique to prevent an asteroid impact can also be mentioned. Then coming to the next question, what is disaster resilience? What is disaster resilience? Disaster resilience you will have to define. You can also make a diagram, for example, hazard, exposure, and this hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and this part will be the risk. Disaster resilience can be defined. How is it determined? After disaster resilience, it determined by various factors. How whether the place is ready to face disaster, various mitigation and adaptation techniques are in place or not. Various elements can be of a resilience framework can be mentioned, and then global targets of Sendai framework. Flooding in urban flooding question. It was pretty much expected because recently there have been many urban floods in India. Two major such floods. In two major such floods, we can mention about flooding in, I think, Mumbai flood can be mentioned, Bengaluru flood can be mentioned, Hyderabad flood can also be mentioned, Chennai flood can also be mentioned. And then policies and frameworks in India. Policies you can mention about Mumbai's eye flows, blue green infrastructure. You can also mention about sponge cities, and frameworks. You can mention We can mention that about guidelines, NDMA guidelines. Another unique techniques can be mentioned. For example, some case studies can also be mentioned. Case studies where urban floodings, for example, China's sponge cities have been able to control urban floodings, but sponge cities also have their limitation as shown in recent flooding in China. These are the things which can be mentioned. Now, China-Pakistan border issues. In this, first of all, we will have to introduce, and then we will make map. In map, we can show this is Pakistan, this is China. Now we will write here on the map itself what are the border issues. Here we can mention about creeks, Pakistan, creeks, desert, forested regions, and then Pakistan uses drug terrorism, It uses terrorist militant elements, fuels terrorism, and also counterfeit currency. And in China part, we can mention about how new forward deployment by China, forward deployment by China, Ladakh issue, Doklam issue, LAC, Pangong So, and other things like in Arunachal Pradesh, forested regions are there, and other things can also be mentioned in the map itself. Then we can see about development being undertaken. One is border area development program, other is BIM scheme. In border area development program, their features can be mentioned, and in BIM also it can be mentioned. Border area development program has features like border area development program features like socio-economic development is one of the features, village development, connecting the villages, BRO's role can be mentioned, and border infrastructure management we can mention about modern equipments given to forces, for example, night vision goggles, night vision devices, radars. These are the things which can be mentioned, and then can be concluded. Or social media and encrypting messaging services. You can define what are encrypting messaging services and how they pose a serious security challenge. In measures adopted at various levels, and some examples can be given. For example, recently, Telegram. Telegram was in news. It can be mentioned. WhatsApp also can be mentioned. Also, one of the most important is dark web. How the how rogue elements and terrorists use dark web to fuel propaganda, because those things are encrypted, and the government agencies face enormous challenges in cracking the code. And I think I also made a graph on this, how cyber crimes have increased to an extent. You can I made a graph on this, and there I think 14,000 cases were there somewhere in 2000, and recently now the cases have gone up to 50 lakh cases, cybercrime cases, due to these. For example, Telegram also is infamous for drug peddling, piracy, etc. These things can be mentioned. And in measures, you can mention some government measures, for example, DP Act 2023, Digital Data Protection Act, IT Act, IT Intermediary Guidelines. And in as other remedies, we can mention that government agencies should keep a on chat groups, watch on chat groups. Okay. And you can mention some examples. For example, CIA uses and counter propaganda mechanism. This collaborative approach by various interagency collaboration. Any other remedies, we can also mention UN resolutions, that UN resolution, United UNSC resolution should be implemented. These are the things which you can be mentioned. Thank you. This was, I think, this was paper 3. This was paper 3. Thank you. Thank you all of you. This was the analysis of GS3 paper. GS3 paper. I tried my best to explain what I wrote in exam hall. What could have been done better? What I wrote was my memo. I tried to explain from my memory what I wrote, and for more information and more analysis video, you can watch our YouTube. I have explained essay paper very well. You can watch that. I have also explained GS1. These are the things. In this, I have not explained idealistic talks, because what we have to do is to learn from experience of mains, the one who has written mains, how to attempt the paper in 3 hours. Then from pragmatism we will move towards idealism. From pragmatism to idealism. Thank you. You can watch more videos, and some more videos will also come. For example, GS2 and GS4 are remaining.